Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back once again to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and a big thank you to David Ralph, host of Join Up Dots. And after listening to where I celebrated 1,000 episodes, on episode number 1,000, he mentioned me on his podcast. I think it was back on October 23rd, and featured me quite heavily in there. So a huge thank you to David Ralph and the Join Up Dots podcast, because I think supporting each other in your industry is the secret to longevity in this game. It's not all about yourself. You've got to help each other. And me and David have always tried to help each other on this podcasting journey that we've both kind of stumbled on. Now, we have covered some big topics this week, but today I wanted to explore how global identity verification provider Ekata is helping some big names such as Alipay, Stripe, Airbnb, and Microsoft, who all rely on Ekata's solutions to approve more good transactions, but also reduce friction and fight fraud. But I also want to learn a little bit more about the technology behind it, and also find out a lot more about identity verification and that whole landscape, a market that's projected to reach an incredible $20 billion next year. And we're also going to talk about the key steps any organisation can take to build customer trust and smooth online customer experience, despite that ever-increasing sophistication of fraudsters and new requirements mandated by customer privacy laws. It's a real minefield out there, isn't it? But that's my master plan for the next 30 minutes. And at the end of all that, I'm going to be asking you to add your thoughts, your insights, your business challenges, because you're a big part of this show too. Ajay Andrews, VP of Product at Ekata, is waiting to join us on this Daily Tech Podcast. But enough from me, rambling on as always. Let me get him onto the show right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Well, first of all, hi, Neil, and thanks for having me on your show. I'm looking forward to spending some time talking about the exciting work we are doing here at Ekata. A little bit about myself. I currently lead an awesome group of product managers and data scientists who build a number of digital identity verification products. And in a nutshell, what that means is, in your daily life, you interact quite likely with a number of companies and products when you're not face-to-face. So you may buy things online, you may order a taxi, you may book an airline ticket, you may transfer some money, or, may even sign up for a dating service, for example, right? And all these companies are building these amazing, innovative services, but they always want to know the user they're interacting with, is that like Neil, or is there somebody masquerading as Neil? And that's the core question we're trying to answer here at Ekata with all our products. In terms of kind of our breadth, our products are used by close to 2,000 companies around the world. These range from very well-known Fortune 100 companies or kind of hyper-growth startups. But back to me, I've been here for almost 5 years, worked in a number of other places before this, but interestingly, I didn't have any background in the space when I joined. So it's been quite fascinating to learn about this industry in my time here.
Excellent. And I also recently read how identity verification and that whole market around it is projected to reach an incredible $20 billion by 2020. So can I ask that you set the scene and tell listeners a little bit more about why this space is such big business right now?
Yeah, it's not only a large space, it's also growing at a rapid clip. And from our standpoint, if you unpack the numbers, there are really two driving forces here. The first is, as you can imagine, a growing proportion of transactions are moving online. And that might just seem obvious, but if you take a moment and you think about the fact that the internet coupled with smartphones have led to a huge number of verticals moving online. So that's not just e-commerce, but it's travel, renting, financial services, all going increasingly online. So that's the first kind of force that is happening. And complementary to that, the second trend is that fraud at scale has really become much easier. And what I mean by that is if you're a fraudster with tools like cloud computing and technology, it's become much easier to acquire stolen identities and use them to profit off online behavior. So between both these trends of a growing proportion of transactions going online and the kind of lower and easier way to attempt fraud, you unfortunately have a very compelling business case for fraud. And that's really what's driving some of the numbers around identity verification.
And like we were talking about there, it is such a huge space and big business right now. But I'm curious, what are the biggest challenges that you're experiencing at the moment in this space?
That's a great question. I'm on the road a lot, talking to a lot of our customers. In fact, I was just talking to one of them yesterday. And in all these conversations, one of the bigger challenges we hear is what we call kind of concern around false positives. And what I mean by that is that there's this effect in the fraud or online verification industry where you might be very effective at reducing fraud, but that comes at the expense of falsely rejecting good customers. So let me give you an extreme example just to visualize this. If you and I were to start a company and we were to block all users, every single person attempting to signing up for our service, and effectively you have zero fraud, right? But you also have zero customers, right? Now, if you move to the other end of the spectrum and you accept everybody signing up, well, then you have zero unhappy, genuine customers because you've accepted everybody. But likely you have a lot of fraud as well. So there's always some kind of collateral damage based on the strategy you use. And what we see today is that, especially our sophisticated customers in the last 2-3 years, using tools like we provide, they really have brought down their fraud to very manageable levels. But now they're trying to win the battle where they're trying to reduce genuine customers who have been falsely rejected. And that's really important because if you think about the cost of acquiring new customers and the lifetime value, you really don't want to turn a good customer away. So that's I would say, one of the challenges we hear a lot about. But the other one I'll talk a little bit about is this notion of a collapsing decision window. And if you think about it, what's driving this challenge is the fact that our customers want to deliver their products and services as quickly as possible. You know, Neil, you and I, we all want things faster. And whether it's an airline ticket, whether it's a piece of media content, whether it's a money transfer, our need for quicker and faster gratification is just growing day by day. And so if you're a company out there, you have this pressure to make an identity verification decision in a smaller and smaller window every single year. Otherwise, you're going to risk losing your customers to the competition. So these two challenges, this notion of reducing false positives and a collapsing decision window, is probably what we see most commonly across all our customers.
And as this is a tech podcast, I feel I must ask you, what's the role of technology in what you're doing here? And indeed, what role is Ekata in playing in solving some of these challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question, Neil. So foundational to all our products is what we call the Ekata identity engine. And that's really a repository of a number of attributes, predictive attributes, which we build internally, innovate on relentlessly, and surface through all our products. But tying it back to these challenges, so if you want to talk about false positives first, we continuously create new attributes which we can prove reduce false positive rates. So the way the rubber meets the road is that we have a portfolio of API products which our customers use in their decisioning engines. So those historically have been Boolean rules, increasingly machine learning models, which effectively decide should you accept a transaction, reject one, or push it into a manual review flow where a human being makes a decision. We also have a web-based front-end tool called Pro Insight, which these agents can use for the most perplexing transactions out there. On the other challenge around this collapsing time window, that's been a big dimension of innovation as well over the last I would say 3 to 4 years at the least. I'll give you one statistic. So the response time, which is the time we take to return these attributes to our customers, in the last, I would say, just 3 or 4 years, we have taken that down from a second to half a second, and more recently 50 milliseconds. So if you just think about that, that's more than one order of magnitude reduction in how quickly we get back to our customers. And there's been no silver bullet. We've invested in a portfolio of skills and just honestly relentless experimentation across disciplines like data engineering, machine learning, locating our services as close to our customers as possible to make this happen. And that's just some examples on that show how we are helping our customers navigate some of these challenges.
And apologies in advance for asking you such a huge question, but what do you think the key steps organizations can take to actually build customer trust and smooth online experience despite the ever-increasing sophistication of fraudsters?
Yeah, sure. I think the answer varies based on what's the life stage of a company, if you will. So if you are a very new company, then what we recommend is that you build some very simple rules, right? So you just started doing some business and you just want to stem the tide of fraud. So build some very simple rules, which with minimal investment will just stop some of the most common fraud attack vectors. But then as your business grows, it evolves, these rules become pretty complex to handle, but also you have more time and investment available, then you probably should consider building at least one machine learning model, which allows you to take a lot of attributes at scale and do decisioning, leveraging providers like us, as well as internal data you may have, which has grown at this point to a level which you can leverage to improve decisioning. And then, again, as you keep evolving and growing, you launch new product lines, you expand to new geographies, then you can think of building multiple machine learning models, building manual review teams, which you staff to kind of reduce some of those false positives and constantly improving some of these metrics. So I think the answer is like a step-by-step approach, and you keep increasing sophistication as your business evolves and as you have the necessary resources and investment to deal with it.
And with over 10 years of experience working in consumer finance, payments, e-commerce, productivity apps, and identity and fraud in both Asia and the US, I've got to ask, what are the biggest technological changes that you've seen in this time?
Well, 10 years is a lifetime in the technology industry. But if I look back, I would probably say there are two secular trends. One for sure has to be the proliferation of smartphones, right? We all now have this device in our pockets which allows us to access the internet anywhere, incredibly powerful computing power. And what that has enabled is the creation and really the acceleration of a whole wave of companies. And, for example, in social media, mobile gaming, ride sharing, marketplaces, and e-commerce, right? There's just so many industries, multi-billion dollar industries created because of the advent and popularity of smartphones. But the second kind of secular trend I'll call out, and this has been something I've personally been involved in at Ekata, so it's very relevant to what we do. Is what I call the democratization of machine learning. And what I mean by that is now, irrespective of how big you are as a company, pretty much anybody in the world has access to an incredible amount of computing power, which, along with large and growing pools of data, allows you to do pattern recognition at a scale really quickly and with high precision, right? And so at Ekata, this has become a core part of our product development, as well as in almost all our customers. But more broadly, I'd say this has become an enabling layer in multiple domains. So whether you talk about marketing, hiring, self-driving cars, image recognition, you look at the kind of home assistance companies have, all of these have become popular because of this democratization of machine learning. So that's the other trend which I've definitely seen in the last 10 years.
And something else that I learned about recently is how Ekata is actually creating a new standard in global identity verification, which ultimately is hoping to provide businesses with the ability to link any digital transaction to the human behind it. I mean, can you expand on that?
Sure. So I alluded earlier to what we have internally called our Ekata Identity Engine, really our foundational asset. And what we're trying to do with that is really allow businesses around the world to identify the customers who are interacting with them on a daily basis, right? And the way we see the world going is increasingly we're going to have more and more services and products where you're going to be interacting not on a face-to-face basis. You're going to be located somewhere in the world and consuming a product or service which is being delivered somewhere else in the world. And our entire goal is that we can provide these entrepreneurs and companies the ability to scale their business, scale their customers, and identify who they're interacting with. And in the Ekata Identity Engine, we really have two what I call pools of predictive data. The first is the identity graph. That's what contains what we call dynamic PII, personally identifiable information. So this is stuff like names, addresses, phones, email addresses. This allows us to answer questions like when you're transacting with a company, we can independently verify the name and the phone number and give back match statuses to our customers. The complementary pool of data is the identity network. That's a repository of behavioral attributes. And the way to think about that pool of information is that we are in a very unique position where we see hundreds of millions of transactions every single day. And so we're able to look at these streams of transactions and use that information when we see a similar transaction in the future, again, leveraging machine learning. And that's really the kind of behavioral intelligence we build off the identity network. So both these predictive pools of data allows us to march towards our goal of really being a global identity verification business.
And I also believe that Geekwire named Ekata in its list of 200 index of Pacific Northwest startups. I mean, this must feel like incredible recognition that you're on the right track and doing the right thing here.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, hopefully we're doing several right things. No, look, I think one reason for sure is just our sheer growth over the years and the number of customers who consider us a core part of their workflows. But probably, and also more importantly, awards like Geekwire are really a testament to our culture. We're a relatively small company for our global footprint and impact. And if I had to kind of look back, I'll say we achieved that with our relentless innovation, our culture of ownership, and teamwork. And we take just big bets on people. We push them to learn and grow. And if you look around, the majority of our senior team has all been promoted from within. I tell people who want to join us that you'll never be bored here. You learn at an amazing pace, solve some hard problems, and that's very attractive to a lot of people who are looking to work in such environments.
So I've got to ask then, moving forward, what is next for Ekata? Is there anything else that you can share with us today?
Yeah, look, our mission is that we want to be synonymous with identity verification around the world. So if you are building a new online business anywhere, we want you to think of us. And so towards that end, you'll see in the coming year, we'll be innovating on, I would say, primarily 3 dimensions. So you'll see a bunch of new products that allows us to go deeper on some of these newer verticals I spoke about earlier in our conversation. We just opened an office in Singapore to grow in the Asia Pacific region. So we'll have a bunch of product improvements to help with the growth in that part of the world. But finally, we'll just have a whole new set of features and reduced response time to provide increasing amount of predictive value to our customers.
And for anyone listening that wants to find out more information on the kind of work that you're doing, or maybe even ask you a question or your team a question, what's the best way of doing that?
Sure. So I always love to hear from people who want to know more about our company, always looking to hire. So I'd say feel free to reach out to me. My email is Ajay, that's AJAY .Andrews @Ekata, ekata.com. You can reach me on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle is Ajay_Andrews. So would love to hear from the listeners on your show or anyone else who is curious to know what we do here.
And if you would like to learn more about Ekata, you can visit the company's website, which is simply just ekata.com. I'll add all those links to the podcast show notes over on the blog post on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. Go to podcasts and you'll find it there. And I cannot thank you enough for coming on today, because one of the things I always say at the end of every episode is technology works best when it brings people together. And what I love about what you're doing here is you're linking digital identity back to humanity with this new standard in global identity verification. So big thank you for coming on and sharing that story with me today.
Absolutely, Neil. I enjoyed talking a little bit about what we do here at Ekata.
I loved hearing more about today's guests and the insights that he has been able to gain after over 10 years of experience working in consumer finance, payments, e-commerce, productivity apps, and identity fraud in both Asia and the US. And also incredibly intriguing to learn more about the current identity verification landscape and how that market is projected to reach $20 billion by 2020. It didn't seem that long ago that saying 20 billion by 2020 seemed, that's years away. This is only, 3 months? And also a big thank you to him for including those key steps organisations can take to build customer trust and smooth online customer experience, despite that ever-increasing sophistication of fraudsters. But this is where I get the virtual microphone and take it away from me and point it towards you. Let me know your thoughts by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweeting me at Neil C. Hughes, or pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. If you need any help with business blogs, event coverage, launching your own podcast, or just check out some of the older episodes. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.